Okay, so I hope you had a good week. Mine was a bit busy. I had promised to do two things. One, to give you feedback on your assignment, which I really I didn't get time to. But the second thing I promised was to put up pre-recorded lectures on research design. So far, I have managed to get the links. I just did I did all three. For quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. I sent to Emma the first two. The last one I just did it today morning, and I've shared with him. He has not yet had time to upload it, but I've put at least the two on Moodle, and I have also opened up two discussion forums so that we can begin asking questions online anytime, and I will be regularly checking on it for questions about research design. So I hope, well, Monday I have a meeting, but I hope sometime during Monday I should be able to go through your first assignment and upload and give you feedback. But in the meantime, let me just show you on Moodle so far what I have put. So it's under the section of research strategies and design. Sorry, let me go back on this. Sorry. So there is this folder where I'd put the initial slides, but now I have split them up. I split them up, so you'll find for the separate videos, these are the lecture slides. So you have a link here. Sorry, this mouse is erratic. It intended to open. The first link here is a video which is talking about research design in quantitative research methods, and the second is qualitative. So once Emma has uploaded the mixed methods, I will include it here. But all lecture slides are in this folder, and then we have some literature to guide you to understand a little bit more on research design. But however, so that you don't get completely lost, some of you had articles which had a specific title. They had, of course, the article has several subsections, but it has several sections, but there were some articles which had a section saying research design. And underneath that, the authors were writing, they were talking about basically their research approach, why they picked that research approach, the research method, and why they felt it was best to answer their research question, and basically how they went about the different phases they went through. That's what research design is. It's basically the plan you've set out to answer your research question. So the different videos are giving you the perspective of the different approaches we have in research. Then I've put up your second group assignment. Before I go further on the assignment, do you have any question? Any question, any concern?
It's quite clear for me.
Okay. Everyone is everyone okay?
Yes, doctor, I think we're okay.
Okay. So here we have the assignment it's a group assignment. And it's basically, we want to start writing the concept, but in groups before we actually go to the final assessment where you do it individually. So this will be your group assignment. I've limited the concept paper to 5 pages. And I highlight an identified research problem or research gap in the areas of IS and ICT, and write a concept paper. So the concept paper will include the following. You notice I didn't talk much about the title. You may include the title, you may not. But for now, I've left it as is. One of the reasons why I really don't like focusing on the title, and also not for you also not to be too worried about getting an extremely perfect research. As you're doing your work, it keeps changing. Your ideas keep growing as you talk about it more, as you read more. So the title is not so important. Your title can even change on the last day. You never know. So I'm starting with the intro. I'm really concerned with the content. So I've started with the introduction. Start with the introduction, and in this section, tell your reader your area of interest and what needs to be done in a conceptualized manner, not in very specific way as you would in the problem statement, but in a general manner, in a very general conceptual manner. Then come to the background of your research problem. So in this section, tell the reader what the nature of your problem is. Yeah. The identified gaps by other researchers and what needs to be done. Then come to your problem statement. By the time we come to your problem statement, we should know already what your problem is. So in this section, you clearly state what needs to be addressed in terms of research. Then I say here, all arguments and discussions in the background should have led to this. You should in this section state what your research question is and how you intend to answer the question. Next, write your main or overall research objective intended to answer. Oh, sorry, this was supposed to be intended to answer your research question. I'll rectify this. Then split your overall research objective into 4 specific research objectives. Now, when anyone reads your 4 research objectives, they should all lead to achieving your overall research objective. Propose depending on your research approach. If it's qualitative, you should be telling us what theories you intend to use to guide your inquiry. What theories do you intend to use? That would be a theoretical framework. If it's qualitative in nature, we should be seeing concepts, the concepts that a conceptual framework, that would be that the conceptual framework would include the ideas, or rather the variables, the generic variables which you feel affect or influence or explain the behavior. So you're trying to explain some kind of behavior. If you're going quantitative. Propose a research design. So I'm thinking the videos I've provided should give you some kind of guidance, and also some articles I saw gave an explanation of what they gave samples of research designs. Conclude your concept paper. And at the end, you should provide a list of references. So submit a PDF file on the 8th of October. That should be next Saturday. So next Saturday, essentially, we shouldn't have a lecture, but you should find posted on 8th of, or sorry, by 7th, you should find posted on Moodle your final assessment. Basically, basically giving you guidelines for your final assessment as individuals. So this, of course, the final assessment, you'll have about 2 to 3 weeks to do it and then submit. Any question? Hello, any question? Alice says none from her. Okay, so I should also put up a quiz somewhere in the middle of the week. Don't worry, the quiz is not very difficult, and I usually give about 2 or 3 attempts to ensure that you get a good mark, but it's just basically examining you and the concepts we've been studying. See if you have an understanding, and it's objective. So I'm going to assume all is okay because everyone is silent. And I'm concerned if everyone is silent. You know, when people don't talk, usually there's a problem. Or maybe Eddie has not yet come in.
It is okay for me.
Okay, everyone is okay. It's only Eddie, the persistent. He reminds me of my niece. I have a niece who can ask questions endlessly, but still it's a good character to have. So here the lecture for today, the slides are also there. These are on data analysis. So let us begin with that. So when we are doing our, after we are done with our concept papers, our proposals, they have been accepted. By the time you've reached at proposal level, once they say, now you're ready for research, that means you can now go to the field and begin to collect data. Whatever it is you've decided to do, if you're designing a system, there must be some data collection. If you're designing a framework, a model, whatever it is, you're going to collect data. So now, once you get that data, you must begin to make meaning out of it because you have to report back. Remember, the final thing you must do is your findings. Yeah. The next, what you must do is communicate your findings. So now, for us to communicate our findings, we must analyze our data. We must give meaning to it. There must be some kind of interpretation. So, of course, all depends on the type of research method that you have used. Whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed. If it's mixed method, then you use both styles of analysis. Because mixed method basically means that you have some methods which were qualitative, some methods which were quantitative. So we're going to begin with quantitative. Mostly, I think I want to begin with it because for me it's a bit of difficult for me because I've done not so much research. I've not done quite a bit of. I've done maybe 2 projects for which were using quantitative data, but most of my research lies mostly, my experience lies mostly with qualitative research. So let's look at quantitative data analysis. Now, one of the key things I want to point out one of the reasons why I'm scared of it is because normally you find the big words, yeah, these really big words which can be scary. I remember one of the times when I went to visit my supervisor, and I was there in that university. The PhD students sit in an office, so it's like you've come to work. It's not you don't go to class or anything. You sit in an office and do your work. So of course, in that same office, you have PhD students, but you also have professors. So even in the corridors, in that lunch where you had your lunch, you're seated with professors and so on and so forth. So I remember this one day, these 2 professors were in the corridor and they started talking about their research project. And they were using these really, really big words. To this day, I can't even remember. They were just big. These really big words talking about qualitative statistical research, the complex, really complex analysis, so to speak. And I remember I got so scared. I was like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Of course, that fear was in retrospect, when I think about it, was that whatever they were saying was their research. My research was quite different. So what we want to, first of all, we want to demystify it. We want to break it down to its simplest format. And believe me, if it's me teaching you this, I have to break it down to its simplest format so that I myself can understand what it is that needs to be done. Quantitative research involves some level of techniques. Most of the time you find you have to use statistical softwares like, I forget what's that. I forget the most common.
SPSS.
SPSS, yes, thank you. SPSS is the most commonly used software. But however, also Excel can also do some good analysis. If you don't have hands on SPSS, Excel can also give you some good analysis. But of course, SPSS is the professional software if you want to go further. Now, of course, what we've understood is analysis comes at the end of data collection, after you have collected data, and it is the time when you're trying to make meaning out of it, because it's raw data and it doesn't make any sense. So you have to make some meaning out of it to see if it helps you answer your overall research question. So now, because we are looking at quantitative research, we understand that we have numbers. Basically, we have numbers, and we must make some kind of numerical representation of our data, some kind of numerical representation to help us get a picture of the answers about the phenomena we are trying to research about. And when we are carrying out analysis, basically what we're doing is we're trying to manipulate that data, trying to manipulate it so that it can give us meaning. Yeah. So first and foremost, we carry out data preparation. Also in qualitative data, we also do data preparation, but we shall discuss that separately when we come to qualitative data analysis. But specifically with quantitative research, we must carry out some preparation. Most of the time it's called cleaning. You're trying to clean the data. So what are you trying to clean up? First of all, you want to look at inconsistencies, where there are situations where there are inconsistencies, something that is incomplete. So here there's an example given. I imagine a respondent does not indicate, maybe there's a question which is asking whether somebody is married or not. The person does not answer, but then goes ahead in another section to say he or she has been married for 10 years and has 3 kids. But in one section, actually didn't respond. So this is inconsistent. So that can allow you to edit, because if the person has said they're actually married, then you can fill in yes on the question where it was put. But in a situation where you can't edit, where the person's answer is necessary and a question was eliminated on the questionnaire, if you have at least 10% missing, then that data must be removed. It will not give you a picture. Yeah. So in other words, let us say if you have administered, if 100 people have responded to you, and out of the 100 people, 3 people didn't answer a vital question. Maybe you are asking about use of e-learning, and then they say they've never used it, and yet you're trying to find out maybe usability of a particular system. If they've said no, then those people's response should not come in. Those should be removed. That's where that's what we mean when we say we are cleaning the data. We are removing information that may give you a wrong, may not complete the picture you need to provide. So that's what we refer to as cleaning up the data. This is the part of editing and eliminating missing information where someone did not give a total response. So after we've cleaned our data, we go to coding and entry. So coding, what do we mean? So you'll have a questionnaire, and the questionnaire has questions. Yeah, you have question one, maybe let us assume question one is asking for the age of the respondent. Question two may be asking for the gender. Question three may be asking for the maybe income level, giving different sections. Maybe if they're earning between 500 to 1 million, and then between 2 million, between 1.5 to maybe 3 million, things like that. Imagine those kinds, a questionnaire with those kinds of responses. Now you want to code that if a person says male, this means 1. If a person says female, this means 2. Yeah. So you begin to code them so that they get a numerical value. So that, or if you're asking, if it's on a scale, you're asking a scale about how people, a respondent feels or their experience with something. Say extremely good, then there could be a middle one, neutral, then poor or extremely poor. Then there you may give different codes, maybe extremely good, you call it 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1, or even up to 0. So that is the coding that we mean. So that later on when you're extracting data, when you want to find out how many are males, then you're pulling out all the ones, all respondents that are 1, then all the respondents that are 2 to indicate female, so that you know among my respondents, if you pulled out 10 ones, those are 10 male respondents. If you've pulled out 18 twos, that means those are 18 female respondents. There's a question here directly to me. This says, I'm sorry, I will not be finishing because of power. That's okay. Yes, Kenneth, I've noted that. Okay, so that is basically coding. The next thing we go to is to transform, to change the data into the new format. Yeah, so that is exactly what I was referring to as coding, so that now when you're entering the data, you change it into that new format, so that you can begin to manipulate it. Do we have any questions so far? Or there may be someone who has even more experience with this and may give us more insight.
Coding. What's the use of coding?
Pardon? You're asking what is the use?
Yes, sorry, doctor.
Yes.
Yes, actually, I was wondering maybe if you could explain more the use of coding.
Okay. So remember, we are going to need to have a numerical representation of the data that has been received. Yeah. So you have administered a questionnaire. You have received respondents. Let us assume they are 100 respondents. And maybe for all the questions you have given out, you need to have a numerical representation. Yeah, numerical representation of the responses back. So take an example of a question where you've asked for the gender. You see this section, the gender of your respondents. Yeah. Now, of course, on the questionnaire you've asked maybe indicate your gender, and you put male, female, and the respondents tick either male or female. They tick either of the two depending on what their gender is. Now, when you're entering this data, you're not going to start, when you're going to enter the data, let's say you pick up questionnaire 1, and then you're going to enter the data, then you indicate that the gender, if the gender is male, you write male. This is statistical data. You have to represent it as in terms of statistics. Now, already, you within your side, you'll say, I'm going to code male as 1 and female as 2. Then you end, as you're entering your entries of all your questionnaires, if you, let's say on the column for gender, your first questionnaire, it's to the person, the respondent ticked male, you'll enter 1. In the second respondent, it was also male, you enter 1. The third respondent, the respondent is female, you enter 2. And so on, and alternating as many as they are. So later on, imagine you're going to extract, to tell your readers the gender distribution of your respondents. You are going to, first of all, extract, as you ask SPSS to extract for you how many were males and how many were females, and even most likely give you the percentage of their gender, okay? So that SPSS can be able to pull out for you how many ones are there. Yeah, how many ones are there. SPSS can pull out and find, if maybe, let's say there were 40 respondents that were male. That means 40% of your respondents were male, and let's say 60 were female. That means 60% of your respondents were female. That is why we code them, we give them that numerical value, so that we can easily turn it into a numerical representation. Have I answered your question?
Yes, doctor, thank you so much.
Okay.
Maybe, doctor.
Yes, please.
Would I say coding is a form of classification of data?
Yes.
Maybe when you have it's in raw data, and
yes.
then you try to classify it into a particular form of understanding with respect to the parameters of the research.
Yes, yes, please. That is what it is. Thank you very much, Giles. Thank you. Enoch, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you very much, Doctor, for explaining this. But my concern is on situations where, if I use, for example, Kobo Collect, which does the automatic converting for you, you just send the questionnaire to the participants, then you get results already sorted. Male, 30, female, like that. Do they allow that, or have to go through the manual process?
Now, I think I've never used Cobalt. I've never used it. I've only used SPSS. So for me, what I'll tell you is, if it's converting for you, the first thing you need to do is, first of all, find out if it's making sense. First, check through and see if it makes sense. Let me give you an example. If you use Google Forms also automatically creates for you graphs and charts with whatever question that is on your form, that is on the form. But however, many times you find those graphs don't make any sense. Google, yes, the Google system is trying to help, but in reality, it's not making much sense. So for me, when I've used Google Forms before, what I chose to do was to extract the Excel sheet myself, and then first of all, clean the data, because most of the time you find it's not clean. So the first thing is to clean it up. Then two, give it coding. Go through the coding itself. If Cobalt is doing the coding for you, first go and check through and see if it makes meaning for what you want to present. So that is the advice I would give you. Justin, you have a question?
Doctor, request for more explanation on data transform.
Data transform. Okay. Can someone just Google the Likert type scale? Just Google it quickly.
spelling, doctor.
It's here on the screen. Likert. Let me just give you an example. Let me give you an example, Justin. Imagine you have a questionnaire and you're asking respondents to give you their feelings or towards the usability of, let's say, Moodle. Yeah. And you have one question. Let me have an example. You have, let's say, one question, one set of questions. You have several questions, but there's one question that says, saying that every time I use Moodle, I find it, every time I'm looking for something on Moodle, I find what I need easily. And then you have a scale. You have a scale there that says, what's that highest scale? To agree, what is it? Highly agree, there's agree, disagree. You can have, someone might have neutral. There is, let me see if I can pull out, sorry, just give me a second. Let me pull out a sample question, a sample questionnaire. Just a second, let me just pull it out and I show you. Give me a minute, let me just pull it out. Do I still have this questionnaire? But I think I can Google it and show you. Let me see. I can't seem to find it. I think I may have misplaced. I remember I had done something.
Yes, doctor.
Yes, please.
Yes, I have mine on my desk. Can I share?
Yes, please do so.
Okay.
Sorry, I've found one. Just give me a minute. Okay. Do you see this? Does everyone see the
Yes,
questionnaire?
yes, Doctor, I can see.
Right. So you see this scale, which is asking somebody to indicate whether they agree strongly, depending on their feeling about something. This one was specifically asking about an mHealth application. Here it says it helps me be more effective in reporting, and the person has a scale to indicate from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Have you got it so far, Justin?
Yes, doctor.
Now let me go back to the slides. Do I have this? Let me see. Let's go back to the slides and see where that applies. Okay, so here when we say data transform, now you may have first designed your questionnaire and you've given it to your respondents, but then you realize that, for example, like the scale that I've just showed you, actually this is something that happened. When you come back, you realize, but this really doesn't make sense. Someone may tick this side, another person may tick 2, and then on the strongly agree, someone may tick here or here. So the question is, where do they actually fall? And you realize that it actually doesn't make sense. And you decide to say, let me ignore certain things. For example, you may even find on your scale, you might have put neutral. And then you realize neutral actually doesn't answer your question. And then you completely leave it out. You decide to remove it. So this is where the data transformation comes in. When you find at a certain point, maybe the middle scale, which maybe no one answered, and you decide to limit it to, like here they said, put it into 3 categories, so that you say that maybe the ones where this from 1 to 2, these do not agree, or from 1 to 2 agree, then from, let's come back to the scale. Let's say from 1 to 3 do not agree, and then from 7 to 6 to 5, those strongly agree. And you leave it at that. You leave it at that, so that because ultimately, just stating that this number of people were in the category of strongly disagree, of varying differences. If you found that ultimately having the entire scale doesn't help you answer the question. Justin, have I answered your question?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Eddie, you had your hand raised. Did you have a question? Or you wanted to show us another example?
Yes, there was one I wanted to show as you are still looking for yours, but I think this can work. Then another question I had.
Yes.
There is find challenges in, okay, there's something I don't understand, especially to do with those scales. I hear there is ordinal scale, nominal scale, what scale. So I sometimes fail to differentiate.
Now I'm also not very conversant with those. What I can
The
do
scales.
is, the scales. What I can do is just try and understand it, then maybe come back to you. But I'm also not very familiar with those. Like I said, I'm not very familiar with quantitative research, more qualitative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
that is the
ultimately, I
challenge.
think what you need to do is find what can help you get your data. It's not necessary to understand everything, but the time you're doing research, you'll find the appropriate tool that you're going to need, that you need to use. I remember the first time when I was dealing with quantitative data, the first time we used SurveyMonkey. Then the next time I was working with some partners, and the gentleman there said, "But do we have to use SurveyMonkey?" I said, "It's for paying." I said, "But no, we can use Google Forms and then use Excel." And it worked. So ultimately, use the tool that is available to help you at this moment and what you understand. If you haven't understood something, it won't make sense. Oh, and Justin, let me just show you also something here. You see this section where it says not applicable. Later on, when I was doing this analysis, I realized this scale was unnecessary and I completely put it out. So that's what we call formatting your data. Justin, have you got it? I hope so. Eddie, you have another question?
Yes, Doctor, I've understood.
Okay. Eddie, you have another question?
Yes, doctor. Assuming you administer a question to respondents, and then you find that some respondents have answered the questionnaire halfway. Maybe answer there are 15 questions. They answer the first 5 or 10, and then leave out the rest.
Okay.
How do you treat such a question?
Okay, this is where we come back to these two sections. Elimination of questionnaires missing more than 10% of your total response. That's what we refer to as data cleaning. Have I answered your question, Eddie?
Yes.
Okay. So let me first check in the chat room. Alice is saying she has understood. So okay, so I think we can move on. Now, one of the things I think we have discussed at length is that quantitative research is about quantities. It's about usually variables. We're trying to find out relationships between variables. We're trying to explain causality between variables. So ultimately, your quantitative research is going to have variables. There's some information you're picking from a respondent. So for example, if we talked about age, if you're asking a respondent about their age, that's a variable. If you're asking a respondent about their gender, are they male or female, that's a variable. If you're asking them to give you their which income scale level do they belong, that's a variable. If their response, their feelings to, like for example, we saw the questionnaire that this asking if using this particular tool makes them more effective in reporting. Whatever response they give you, that's a variable. So ultimately, you're going to be analyzing these variables. You need to have a numerical representation of these variables. Now, you may need a numerical representation of just one variable. Take an example. You may want to give a profile of the age groups of the gender that has the gender distribution of your respondents. So if you're just looking at gender, you just want to provide a numerical representation, that's one variable, yeah, that we are looking at. Or we want to give an age distribution or age groups that exist, that's one variable. So in that case, we want to analyze just one variable. This is called univariate. In other cases, we may want to have a numerical representation of two variables. So take an example, you want to see CGPAs of students in a particular, a certain group of students and the gender distribution. So you want to look at at how do the females perform, how do the males perform. Want to look at the male and female performance comparison of the two. So that is there we're looking at two variables in essence. Then we have cases when we have multiple variables, multiple variables. So here, let us say somebody is looking, he wants to look at age groups in relation to education and in relation to prejudice, the relationships between age, education, and prejudice. This is here we're looking at multiple variables. So let us see how each of them can be represented properly. So when we're looking at one variable, essentially this section it's not explanatory, it's descriptive in nature. So that is also you can have, maybe if you're doing qualitative research and you decide, let me also have a questionnaire to give a description of this phenomena. You can do that. You can do that and then focus on just one variable, and you provide a description, maybe to give a profile of your respondents. So with this, with just one variable, we are not looking at relationships. We are simply providing a description rather than an explanation. So this is very different from using two variables or more when we are trying to find an explanation, a causal relationship between variables, between two or more variables. So in using just a single variable, we may want to provide the frequency distribution of a particular variable. So for example, we may want to find amongst our respondents how amongst the how many are female, how many are male, or which group of, or in the age groups, which is the youth group, which is the under 18, that frequency distribution. We may also want to classify. This is we may be using it for classification of variables, especially its personal data. Then also it is to give researchers a general picture of the maybe of the maximum, the minimum responses, that kind of thing. So here we have an example where respondents are asked to give their religious preferences. And here the researchers give frequency distribution. For example, here they say Protestant respondents were of this number. These were the Catholics and Jewish and so on and so forth. And then they go ahead and give percentages. So this is simply giving a distribution of all respondents where they lie in terms of religion. You can also do the same in terms of age. You do the same in terms of gender and whatever else. Or if it's, let's say, you are giving out a questionnaire for students in a university, you give a distribution according to years, those who are in third year, second year, those who are doing masters, those who are doing PhDs, just to give a distribution of where each one lies. So this is mainly for descriptive purposes. So the pie chart gives a better numerical representation. So if you see this pie chart, it gives a better representation than the table itself. So if it's just for purposes of showing what is the distribution, religious distribution of my respondents. So take note of which graph best gives a numerical representation. The second was to provide this is a central tendency. So here we are looking at the mean, like the average, mode, which appears the most, which is mostly frequently occurring, and then the medium. That is the middle attribute, that in terms of the rankings, which one is most gravitated towards that. So here is an example of central tendency, where you are trying to provide the middle ground in your statistical representation. So mean is basically getting the sum divided by the number. We all know that. Then we have the mode. So here, in this particular case, the mode is that the majority, the most frequent age to appear is 19 in our respondents. So the 19-year-olds are the most frequent respondents, age group respondents. Then median, like we said, is which value is in the middle of this. So again, it's 19. The third was dispersion, looking at dispersion. So here again, it would be, let us say, trying to find out which is the highest value, which is the lowest value. Then also there's standard deviation, where we say the highest standard deviation means data that are more dispersed, then the lowest, those which are batched together. Now okay, take an example. If we're looking at what we mean by this, let us say we're looking at IQ levels. IQ levels between men, and we divide the class into males and then females. And then we measure IQ levels. And let us say we find that maybe with 10 males and 10 females, among the males, we have maybe 2 that are at 200, 4 that are at 50, then 3 that are at 80, that kind of distribution. Then among the females, we find that we have maybe out of 10, 4 are 10, another 4 are 4 are 100, another 4 are maybe 105, and the remaining are at 106 or 1010. So you see that among the females, they are more batched together, whereas the males are more dispersed. Yeah. So giving such statistics, again, to show the disbursement, how among our respondents, how dispersed the responses, the results may be. Let me look at the chat room. Roger is talking about the math. Believe me, Roger also don't like the math, but don't worry. I am not going to go to those difficult mathematical equations that Eddie is talking about. I'm also quite allergic to math.
Dr. Shiba, could you repeat the standard deviation and variance?
Okay. Now, okay. When we look at this one, which says that we look at data which is more dispersed, data which may be more dispersed. Okay, let me make it easier to age groups. Let me put it back to age groups. And then we say we look at the males and females in this classroom. We want to get the age of each member, both male and female, and then we separate them. And we want to see how dispersed are the age groups between the males and between the females. So if let us say the males among 10 male students, you find we may have a 47-year-old, we have a 60-year-old, then we have maybe 2 24-year-old in the age of 23, 24. Then we have 5, maybe 4 that are 18, and then maybe 6, no, not 6, that's a bit much now. 1 who is 30. Now you notice amongst the men, their ages are dispersed. They're not in one category. They are not batched together. There are very few so so would say in the males they have a higher standard variation, standard deviation. If you can't necessarily group them together. Then if you go to the females and you find maybe 6 at 24 are between the ages of 24, 25, 26, and 4 are between the ages of 22, 21, 23. Now those ones would have a lower standard deviation because they are more batched together. They are not scattered like the males. Yeah. So now imagine if you're looking at deviation in standard deviation in terms of responses to how users feel about a particular system. Now, of course, here, when I talk about ages, it doesn't make much sense. But let us say we want to find out the usability of a system. And we scale it, we put levels where we say agree, disagree, what were the other questions? Was it highly, I forget the words. Is it a highly agree, neutral?
Agree and highly disagree.
There is high, then you can also put highly agree, neutral, disagree, and highly disagree. So let us say we want to find out the standard deviation between those who disagree and those who agree, and to see if they are more agree than highly disagree, and they are more highly disagree and agree, to see the scales between the two. If you have more batch together who are saying highly disagree, then and probably they're higher in statistical value, then one can, then as the researcher, you can come to a conclusion that this particular system is most likely not usable, because the majority of hands on the side of disagree, majority have answered highly disagree. Justin, have I answered your question? Or I've even confused you more?
It's Pauline was asking, but I've understood.
Okay, thank you. I'm also putting up an article for you that gives more explanation on some of these things. Now we come to another format of numerical representation. And some of the things, especially it comes to data editing, that would help you understand how to edit that data. We have what we call discrete and continuous and discrete variables. So a continuous variable is one whose value is infinite. Its value can be infinite, and its value is basically what is here. It's infinite. Take an example, age. Okay, although we don't expect that someone can live up to 200 years old, but we can have, let's say, the age of an artifact being 200 or even 3,000 years old. Yeah, that is possible. So also our income levels, they can also be infinite. Or someone may say, how does someone have an income level of a trillion or something? Yeah, there are people who are that wealthy, but it's essentially it's those variables whose value can increase or decrease at any given time. The next are scales. Especially we looked at the Likert scales. Also those scales also, they are not exactly infinite, but they can also change. And also the ratios. So those are variables that are continuous. Then you have discrete variables whose responses are, they are either or. So take an example of marital status. You're either married, single. Yeah, you're either married or single, one of the two. Same thing with gender. Same thing with nationality. Yeah, your nationality, there's only a finite number of countries that exist. And then you have the scales, and I think that's what Eddie was talking about, the nominal and ordinal and so on and so forth. So the scales that we looked at, for example, on the Likert scales, I think that is another type of scale that we can consider. But those are discrete variables that have precise or finite values that can be taken up by those variables. The next thing we want to talk about is subgroups. Now, subgroups will also be important when we talk about the bivariant and multivariant variables. Yeah, these will become quite important, but let's first discuss them. It may be important for you to create subgroups for the sake of comparison. Yeah, for the sake of comparison. Here is an example where there was this research done by the General Social Survey 2004. And here they were asking people, they asked respondents what their opinion was about legalizing, is it married? I don't know, some people call it marijuana or something, but may I call it weed? Let me just call it weed for the sake of all of us to understand. So they were asking them their opinion on what they thought about legalizing weed, and responses came in. They are, this first row indicates those who were in support, and the second row indicates those who, or rather third row indicates those who do not support. So now what these researchers did, they decided to create subgroups to actually indicate under what age groups do we have an agreement. So we had under 21, those who were under 21, 27% said it should be legalized. And the funny thing is, 73% said should not be legalized under those who are under the age of 21. Now, one here would ask, would wonder why. You find most of the time those who are under 21 are still young, and they are probably still at home and under the influence of their parents. So these ones will say, no, let it not be legalized. Now you have here those who are between the ages of 21 and 35, generally the youth. 40% said yes, and then 60% said no. Okay, 40%. That was the highest. Then you have the 36 to 54. You have those who are still coming out of the youth bracket and a bit mature. You have 37% saying yes and 63% saying no. Then you have the totals at the bottom. Then of course the least were those who are 55 and above, where 24% said no. So this is, so when you divide it into subgroups, one can start to give interpretations to this data. One can start to give and say, probably this means this, probably this age group is more mature and therefore would not be, and they've learned from life, they've had quite a bit of an experience. So when somebody begins to subdivide and give a response, they can begin to provide an explanation. Yeah, this is now us giving meaning to our data. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? So I take it silence means consent. So think about it in maybe any research area you might have interest, maybe to find out also how the age, or let us say, imagine you are giving a questionnaire to students, let's say on Moodle, and to see if you subdivided them into faculties, faculty of science, and specifically those in IT, or IS, those in statistics and economics and blah, blah, blah. Then you go to faculty of built environment, you go to those in ethics and development studies, and you subdivide them, and then you see the responses. It would be interesting to see what the responses, how the responses are based on the faculty in which one belongs. That would be interesting. Even for lecturers, then also for lecturers, you'd ask even in age groups. It would be interesting to know what those, if you divided the lecturers between maybe those who are, I don't know if there's a lecturer who's 25, but let's imagine between the 25 and 35-year-olds, 36 to 30 to maybe 45, then 46 to maybe 55, and so on and so forth. And see that if you subdivided them and you see where these responses lie in terms of age, yeah? We can also have what we call collapsing response categories. So here is an example. What this basically means. Let us say here we have an example of a survey that was done to find out people's attitudes towards the United Nations and what they feel about the job they are doing. What kind of job are they doing? So here what the researcher did was to create two different categories. Those who were on the very good and the very bad, and those who were in between. Yeah, those who were in between. So here you have the very good and very good job and good job. So here you have percentages. There was from Germany 2, Japan 1, then good job, Germany, there were 46, and very good job for Japan, it was 11. Now, when it came to the middle, Germany also had, they were quite there in the middle. Then Japan had 12, yeah, 12 of these. And then poor job, for poor job, Germany had 21 and Japan had 42. Then very poor, Japan had 5 and Germany had 6. The interesting thing is, this is just one thing I learned. One time I was talking to 2 international students. There were 2 people from different countries. One was Japanese young lady, and the other was from Tunisia. So he tells a story of what was it? A company, an American company selling yogurt, went to Japan, and they pulled out a sample group of people to give them their yogurt to test. And this sample people were supposed to tell them whether it tasted good or not. So they gave them the first flavor. They asked them, do you like it? And these Japanese respondents bowed their heads smiling. They gave them the second. They asked them, do you like it? They bowed their heads smiling. And then like that for all of them. And then the American company put the yogurt on market, and it flopped, completely flopped. Nobody took it up. And I remember the Tunisian gentleman was asking this Japanese lady, why can't you just tell the truth? Then the Japanese lady, she laughed. Then she said, you know, in Japan, it's considered extremely rude to say no. I don't like this thing. So they have a polite way of saying no. You just have to be in tune with the culture to know what exactly someone feels. So it's interesting even to see here that their don't knows were a lot more. So this is also another way of just also again, that was just an aside, but providing collapsing responses can also help you provide a better representation and also help you give a better explanation for the respondents. Now, you notice there was I don't know part, okay? You noticed that. And earlier I had told you that in the questionnaire which I showed you that I had also had an NA not applicable, and then later on I realized it didn't make sense, so I removed it out. So you might also find you don't have an explanation for those who say don't know. So you may exclude it. But in some cases, even this response is important. If someone says, I don't know, it basically it may actually mean the UN has not done a good enough job of reporting to the general public about what they do. What is their mandate, so that they can be clearly, let's say, evaluated. So if someone says don't know, and yet the UN is supposed to serve everyone, then that means probably that response the researcher can say that the UN has not done a good enough job to report or to give an accountability for what they do. After all, I think the UN, several countries put money into the UN. I'm thinking, I'm not sure. Someone may correct me there. Any questions so far? No, I'm going to assume silence means consent. So we come to the bivariant analysis. So this is where the subgroups can come in. The subgroups can come in, where you can really use the subgroup comparisons that involve two variables. So here, bivariant basically means you're analyzing two variables simultaneously. Two variables simultaneously. Now, for when we use the subgroups for the univariant, we are basically doing it for purposes of description. But for the bivariant analysis, here we are trying to determine relationships between variables themselves. So here is an example of a research that was done where they were trying to determine religious attendance based on gender. So they looked at weekly. Weekly, they found 22% of those who attended religious services were male and 31% were female. Those who said less often, 76 were men and 69 were female. So this gives the actual total figures of those who did respond. Now, when you compare the two, you automatically see women actually attend religious services more than men. Yeah, they attend more than men. We can make a conclusion that gender has an effect on church attendance. That's what it basically suggests, that gender has an effect on church attendance. And someone can make that conclusion on the reason why more women attend. That may be assumed at this point. Yeah, it can simply be assumed. However, the researcher Charles Clocks used theory to say, use the theoretical interpretation. Yeah, so that means use an existing theory. Like, for example, in ICT, we have term. One can use that to make a conclusion. For him, he said, women are still treated as second-class citizens in the US. People denied status gratification in secular society may turn to religion as an alternative. Hence, women should be more religious than men. That was his conclusion. I don't know, I'm not saying that is the truth, but for him, he used a theoretical interpretation. Okay? So far, any question?
We continue, Doctor.
No question. Today there is so much silence. Even Eddie, who is full of questions, has not asked that many. Let me hope things are going okay. Using percentages. Yeah, using percentages. When one uses percentages, one needs to find out which direction which direction the percentages are pointing to. Let us see an example here. Here we have an example. Let me just pull this down a bit. Here's an example. Let's say a group of men and women are given a questionnaire or in a survey. They are asked on whether they favor gender equality or not. Okay, whether they favor gender equality or not. Now imagine this first set of individuals that we see here is the raw data. Yeah, is the raw data that has come in. This lady is for it. This gentleman is not. This lady is not for it. This lady is for it. So all those with the plus are in favor. All those with the negative are not in favor. So let us rearrange them. Let us assume now we are rearranging it in whatever we are using, whether SPSS or Cobalt, whatever it is we're using. We separate them. We indicate how many female respondents are in favor and how many female respondents are not in favor. Then you have how many males are in favor and how many males are not in favor. Okay. Now, when we come to giving it a percentage, we are basically saying this percentage is in favor, this percentage is not in favor. So now if you see when we count here, we see 8 women were in favor, 2 were not. And then here we see 6 men were in favor and 4 men were not. Therefore, now if we put it in percentages, we know now it's 80%, 60%. Yeah? We know it's 80%, 60%. Therefore, someone can come to a conclusion that majority of the people are in favor of gender inclusion. However, gender equality, however, more females are in favor of it than men. Okay, more females are in favor, more women are in favor of gender equality than men. Although majority of respondents, regardless whether you're male or female, are in favor, but it is more highly likely to find a female in favor of gender equality than it is to find a male respondent. So far, are we making sense? Someone here has put a nice comment that Eddie needs to put on his video so we can appreciate he's not asking questions. Indeed, it's a quiet time. Okay, let's move on. So really, I'm just trying to simplify quantitative data analysis because like I said, myself, I'm not really good at it. So I wouldn't want even for myself to complicate it. Constructing and reading gender. Okay, this is basically telling you what I've just concluded. What basically just concluding what I have given you. So here we have seen how the subgroups have helped us clearly define the responses, give the percentages, and then we can actually make a conclusion. Yeah, we actually can make a conclusion based on this of the subgroups and providing percentages. Then finally, we come to the multivariate analysis. When we have more than one variable that we are analyzing, more than 2 variables okay? Again, it's the same in the same category as bivariant analysis. You're trying to explain relationships. So here you have a survey which was looking at 3 variables: religious attendance, gender, and age. Yeah, 3 variables. Okay, 3 variables. So now here you have the results. You have men under 40 and women under 40, under 40 and older. Okay, and you find sorry, I'm mistaken. Here you have men and women that are under 40. And again, you still see women are higher in number than men. Then you have those who are 40 and older. You still see women are still a higher number is there. And then also you notice that the older you are, the closer to God you most likely are getting. Yeah, and I think this is a pattern we can all see, but a research like this concretizes what has been seen, what is actually visible. Okay, so a researcher with these statistics can make a conclusion that women are more likely to attend are more likely to be active in religious attendance, and even more so those who are 40 and above. So in other words, the older you are, the more likely you are to be religious, or attending religious services. So in a nutshell, this is how we can make we can explain our data, and then also begin to generalize to a larger population. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Are we okay?
Yeah, okay, doctor.
We are okay. Okay, then so we can move then to qualitative research. So let me just open up that those slides for qualitative research.
Quantitative research.
Okay, so I hope everyone can see the screen.
Yes, doctor, we can see it.
Yes, doctor.
It's visible.
So let's now go to qualitative research analysis. Now, when we have qualitative research, remember when we talked about what qualitative approach is and qualitative methods and the kind of data that we pick, the data in qualitative research cannot be reduced, cannot be easily reduced. It cannot be easily reduced to numbers. We cannot easily, we can say, yes, I interviewed this number of people and this number of people said this, but really you can't easily reduce it to that. What we can do with it is related to concepts, opinions, values, and behaviors of people. Yeah, we can relate it to concepts, opinions, values, and behaviors of people. Yeah. Now, one of the first things we need to do, one of the major things we need to do is to, when we have our qualitative data, and now unlike quantitative data, we know we have a questionnaire, people have filled it in, and yeah, that's our data. Now with qualitative data, what do you have in essence? What do you have? You went to the field, you interviewed people. So when you interviewed, you probably noted down what the people said. More importantly, you may have also recorded what was said. Then you might have had a focus group discussion. Same thing, you asked a question and responses were given, differing responses. You write down what was said and you also record, probably you also record. Maybe you observed as people were doing something. So maybe you have a video of as people were carrying out a certain act, or you have pictures, and you may have documentation which you're also using, maybe the documentation from an organization. All of these, what do you, now you have all this chunk of data which you can't count. What do you first do? We begin to do what we call classifying or coding. So we also code, but not the same way as the quantitative researcher, the researcher who has used a quantitative approach. We categorize them. We want to begin by to categorize them. Yeah. What is this process? What is this process? What we are trying to do with this data is to explain, understand, or interpret. We're trying to explain and understand or interpret the people and situations that we're investigating. We want to explain their behavior. We want to create an understanding. And then also, we also want to interpret some things that are said by people are not exactly straightforward. Yeah? They're not exactly straightforward. It's not the same thing as a questionnaire. Let me give an example. Imagine management in Umu decided to implement a system completely separate from the ICT department. Yeah, they implement this system. Then later on, you come in as a researcher, you want to evaluate acceptance of this system. Then you come in to interview Emma, who is part of ICT. And as you're talking to him, you say, oh, I've come to interview you about this, and he accepts. Then you start maybe asking him his name, his qualifications. He tells you, have you seen this system? Yes, I have. Do you know what it is about? He tells you. Then you ask him, what do you feel about, do you think it will work? Then he says something like, was I asked on whether it would work or not? Now that statement he has given is vague, but you can make meaning out of it. You as a researcher, if you transcribed it later, if you have it now recorded, you wrote it, you can transcribe it later, you can make an interpretation. By the time he's making a statement like, was I asked? He is talking about, his statement is speaking about an underlying, what we call it, underlying disagreement or dissatisfaction with the fact that a whole system was brought without consulting ICT. And even you can even go ahead to begin to make an interpretation and a conclusion that most likely this system will not have support from certain units in the university. Yeah, so that is what I mean by interpretation. You have to make interpretation. Let me go further and explain. So now what we are doing in data analysis for qualitative research, we try to break down the data into small units. Yeah, we are trying to break down the data into small units, where we're going to make connections. Bear with me just a few minutes. Analysis for qualitative research actually begins when we first begin to interact with the participants. That's when data analysis for qualitative research begins, unlike quantitative research, okay? We begin to make analysis as we begin to collect our data. Imagine that researcher who sat down with Emma. Immediately as Emma made that statement, he would make a note in his or her diary. He or she would make a note. There seems to be underlying feelings of antagonism towards the system because there was a lack of maybe full participation and inclusion during the system selection, system design, selection, and implementation. Okay, you begin to make those notes. That's the thing about qualitative research. Immediately you begin to make not just what somebody is saying, but you begin to make a side notes. This interpretive nature, the things that you start to do at the time you're collecting data, later on, as you begin to code it, will become very important. They become very, very important at the time you begin to put all this data together. Now, one of the most important things about quantitative research, qualitative analysis, data analysis, you really need to be careful about the conclusions you come to. So you make note as you do your research, make note, but go ahead and continue to collect your data, but don't come to any conclusions as yet. Don't come to any conclusions as yet. Yes, we have an experience of researchers. All of us are inexperienced, but that's the good thing about taking time not to come to a rushed conclusion. Today I'm inexperienced. Tomorrow, as I continue going to the field and picking more data, I become more and more experienced. The other common problem is the researchers' ideas trying to take over without the support of data. So again, focus on collecting as much data as you can. Yeah, focus on creating as much data as you can. The desire to try and finish quickly, you must squash that. Do not panic. Qualitative data really takes a bit of time to sit, understand, and be as open-minded as possible, as open-minded as possible. Now, a person who was trying to be impulsive would listen to Emma's comments and say, some people are being big-headed. Some people are being big-headed and then they don't want to listen. And yet, you've not really understood if someone was excluded in the process of design, selection, and implementation, then why should you expect a positive attitude from that person? Now, an important thing about qualitative data is living with the data. That means being open-minded and understanding, making a genuine effort to understand every single point of view of your respondents, no matter how differing they may be. If you've interviewed Emma and he has said one thing, and then you go to Goretti says something else, opposite. Then you go to Jude said something else completely different. Get all those opinions. All of them create a full picture. All of them. Now, the issue of coding. The issue of coding. Now here in quantitative data, in qualitative, research, we are trying to group our responses. We're trying to make them more manageable. We are grouping our responses into smaller sections, categorizing them, classifying them and categorizing them. We're making them more manageable. Okay, we're making them more manageable. And when we do that, we begin to see the relationships between the categories and the patterns that emerge. Yeah, so here is what you do. You've gone to the field, you've been taking notes, you interviewed people, you had focus group discussions. What's the first thing we do when we now begin at the end of it all, we begin, what's the first thing we do? We make transcripts. Yeah, we create transcripts. You have recordings. Now, for example, I had many recordings. So what did I do? I listened and then typed them out. Verbatim, what they call verbatim, word for word, what people were saying. And of course, for me now, many people were speaking Luganda, so at certain points I would get lost, but I made sure to write a transcript that was precisely what the person was saying. You transcribe it. Yeah, creating a transcript, you transcribe it. Then the next thing you do, print out that transcript. Let's say if it was an interview with Emma, you type it out, print it out. An interview with Goretti, type it out, print it out. An interview with Jude Luaga, type it out, print it out. An interview with the head ICT, type it out, print it out. Then you go to maybe the other users, maybe who are lecturers. You interviewed maybe two or three lecturers. Lecturer one, type it out verbatim, exactly what the person said. Then lecturer two, lecturer three, exactly that. But remember, as you are interviewing, you are making notes. Yeah, you are making notes. Now, also these notes become helpful. So as you pull it out, begin to underline with a pen. Begin under the points that maybe bring out the feeling of someone towards something, their opinion. You can make brackets, whatever it is, you may use a numerical value, whatever it is, whatever makes you happy. Underline it. Begin to underline those points that are, whatever those statements they are saying that are important. Then when we say code, we can, let us say, this is my text. What you see on the screen here is my text. I have underlined this statement. I also underlined this statement. And then I underline this statement. Let's assume this is a transcribed work. Then I can write out. This one talks about inclusion. I write it out, the word inclusion. Let's assume I'm writing the word inclusion. This one is talking about maybe governance. And this one is talking about maybe transparency. Yeah, I'm writing it out. And as I write it out, I begin to see maybe governance and transparency are together. I can create a theme out of it. Inclusion, maybe I create inclusion with something else, I create another theme. Yeah, so far are we together? Don't worry, I'm going to show you a live example of what somehow, okay. Let me come to the real end and show you something, a live example. Do you see this? You see the image here? Yes. This was something I did in my research. So as people were talking, I had many people talk about inaccessible healthcare services. what you hear what somebody's saying, they're saying many times you can't carry the child to the hospital is far, it is better to first go. Other times, maybe that's another person says, but when you come here, that the nurses are not here, they're doing. Now, the two statements, one person who says the nurses are not there, and the other person who says that the hospital is too far, they're all saying inaccessible healthcare services. So far, are we together?
Yes.
Yeah, so that therefore, what did I do? I coded this as inaccessible healthcare services. Then we come to this one. Maybe the one person says, for me, I preferred to go to the traditional birth attendant because she's nearer me, and then she understands me, she gives me privacy. That shows you a traditional and information isolated society. Then a healthcare worker says, these people prefer to go to a traditional birth attendants because they find them cheaper. When you come here, you're telling them to line up, they don't want to line up. All those statements are pointing to this. Then you come to this one, how this code was created. How was this code created? Where someone says, most of the time you don't have money to go to the health facility to pay for those lab tests and all of that. That means that person is disempowered. Then another person says, many times our sick people are very weak. They cannot walk. That points to a disempowered. So what did I do? I created that code. Yeah. Now, next thing, maybe another person from another interview, we found out there was need for adherence to treatment. Sorry, this was from another interview. We created these as needs, information and healthcare needs. Yeah, from other interviews, just to find out what healthcare information needs. And then you find healthcare workers were saying, we need people to take their drugs and on time. Yeah. Then you find this, the community members were saying, you come here, you line up and so on and so forth. And then someone is saying, therefore we said another thing, another ICT need was, or rather healthcare need was need for booking and inquiry services. And then another person, maybe a healthcare worker was saying, these people don't understand the sensitivity of giving birth. They just go to traditional birth attendants who don't know. That is need for education and sensitization. And then another person says, you tell these people you need to eat like this. They don't want to listen. They don't want to listen. So what does that? That is another code. Now, you begin to relate them. Inaccessible healthcare services is associated to need to adherence for treatment. Inaccessible healthcare services related to need for this. Then here you have an overarching theme. Information and communication needs from end users. So I created this theme for the information and communication needs. This was what I created, and then I began to argue it out as more than a paragraph in my thesis. And that's why I created, I had a paragraph which was interpreting that from the research, there were information and information and communication needs which were identified from end users. This is what they said. There was a need for adherence to treatment reminders. And thereafter, then I gave examples. One health worker, P1, stated blah, 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 blah. Again, a healthcare, rural community member stated this, blah, 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 blah. All these statements indicate that there is need, these healthcare workers, these community members fail to access healthcare services, and therefore fail to keep up with their treatments, their required treatments. based on this, this research probably says that there is the need for information. These are the specific needs that an mHealth application can have. You state, yeah. So far, I don't know if I have concretized what I was saying before.
Yes, doctor. I'm meeting you.
I hope I've not confused you further. Have I confused
you
you
haven't.
further? Okay, that's good. So basically, the themes we generate, as when we begin to see similar issues and ideas emerging from what was expressed by the participants. Yeah. So the themes may be labeled as a word, an expression, whatever it is that can bring forward your point from your analysis. So basically, all these are really not necessary. So the first step in explore is in data analysis is to explore the data. Read through the data, make sure the information is complete, obtain a good sense of the data, then create memos, read and write memos about all field notes and all comments. That's the importance of the diaries, keeping a diary at all times. In coding, pick one doc, like I think this one I explained well. Pick a document, one from an interview, one for the field. Go through it asking questions. What was this person talking about? What does it point to in my themes? Yeah, what does it point to? Identify segments, place brackets around them, assign codes. Now, the nice thing, there are some applications, just like quantitative research has things like SPSS. Qualitative research also has software. The one that I know is Atlas TI. With Atlas TI, when you've transcribed your data, you can actually import your transcribed texts into Atlas TI, where you can actually highlight and code the verbatim statements. You saw that diagram that I showed you, that was extracted directly from Atlas TI. And I used that to explain a point that I made. So far, are we together?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, we're together, Doctor.
Okay, identifying themes. So these are the patterns that emerge. So again, like I was pointing to out the patterns that were pointing to the information needs that I was earlier alluding to. Now, also the other thing that is important is using a theoretical framework. The theoretical frameworks I used basically helped me point out information needs, so that I knew I was looking for information needs. I was looking for vulnerability, what we call vulnerabilities. What was that framework? I told the livelihood framework. The livelihood framework would point out what are the strengths, what are the needs, what are the vulnerabilities that exist, and what is it that is going to prevent this person achieving. So that theoretical framework helped me also in creating my themes. Ogola, you have a question.
Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, somewhere you were talking about verbatim. You mentioned something about around recording, and I'm just wondering
what that means.
No, not really what it means, but I'm just wondering, wouldn't you don't you get a bit of resistance? People are a bit cagey in terms of if you want to record them, to record what they are saying, or maybe it depends on the kind of research you're doing.
Okay, well, number one, it depends. First of all, that's a very good question, Ogola. That question is actually very good in terms of qualitative research, especially using that approach. the thing about qualitative research, you must have a relationship, some kind of relationship with the participants. You must have some kind of relationship because, as you said, people can get cagey. Now, for me, in my case, I spent 2 years with that community. Yeah. So I used to go for every workshop they had, every training. So over time, they got used to me that even they would start saying, hey, Sheba, come we eat. Sheba, the community members, they got used to me. So at the point when I was recording, they were used to me and they were quite open. So that is one. So two, if you're going to do qualitative research, make sure that there is a relationship that exists. Yeah, make sure that there's a relationship that exists between you and the context so that people can open up easily to you. And of course, there's also the added ethical element where you always ensure to the participant that your identity will not be revealed. Have I answered your question?
Yes, that's clear, Doctor.
Okay.
It is, it's okay.
Yeah, it's a very, very important question that you've asked. So that's also a guiding principle that you must have. So we have already talked about the themes. So I think that one is clear. You can also categorize your themes into what we call ordinary themes, themes that are research expected, especially those which are connected to your theoretical framework. Yes, Sarah, you have a question? Sarah, do you have a question?
Yes, Doctor. I would like to know the difference between descriptive data and exploratory.
Descriptive, okay. If we want to talk about this, okay, let's take it back to the quantitative slides we went through. We said that there are some variables which are their purpose is simply for descriptive purposes. If you want to describe who your participants are, for example, if you asked for gender, you'd say we had this number of males, this number of females, and we had these age groups, period, and you stop there. That is just to describe who your participants are. That is descriptive data. Then you had the other variants. We talked about variables where you are comparing one variable to the other. That one was explanatory in nature. Okay, that was explanatory in nature. Now, if we are talking about qualitative research, if you are talking about descriptive data would probably come to describing who your participants are. Just having a general description of who your participants are. My research looked at, let's say you say, my research looked at teaching and non-teaching staff, students and the students of a university, and these included undergraduate, postgraduate, undergraduate and postgraduate students. We looked at distance learning and part-time and so on and so forth. That is basically descriptive in nature. Or even you go ahead to describe the context in which the participants where they are. Then when we come to exploratory, this is when we begin to create, to have an understanding of the participants and their experience. Either an experience with a particular phenomena. Is it a system? Is it a particular process? Whatever it is, that data that is exploratory. So for example, the image I showed you here at the end, at the very end here, is exploratory in nature. This data was essentially bringing out what are the information needs of the end users. Sarah, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, Doctor, you've answered it. Thank you.
Okay. So let me just go back. So back to the themes. You may have ordinary themes, especially themes that you were expecting, especially from your theoretical framework, or themes that you already knew existed from literature. Yeah, from literature. So then you have what we call unexpected themes, themes that are a surprise, themes that never before you would have thought of. So for example, I'll give you an example. A theme that was unexpected for me in my research was mobile literacy. It was totally unexpected that there was such a thing as mobile illiteracy. Yeah, so that is possible. Then you have the hard to classify themes because they don't essentially fit in. Advice is if there are things that you can't easily explain, you may decide to put them out as you may decide to put them out. Then you can classify some things as major or minor. Those that may have limited effect or limited relationship effect, or those which have major. You can also decide to classify them as you saw fit. So the themes, in other words, the themes are the summary of all your codes. The themes are summary of all your codes. Let me just go back to this. So you saw all these codes that were created. This theme was the summary of all those codes. And here, the different codes I got, the different variables I identified, I was showing the causal relationship that they had. So far, are we together?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, we are, doctor. Yes, we are, doctor.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, here is a situation where a researcher decided to classify his or her research. So you can do something like this, where you classify the major themes and the minor themes and report as just as that. Now, this is also another one which is color coded. Yeah. So you have interviews with teachers and the codes that came out, observations with students and the codes that came out, a questionnaire with students and the codes that came out. And from this, a person can then create themes, themes that can relate these with these quotations, those codes. So that researcher can write up and explain things in a narrative format, then use the actual quotes from the participants. Like I also said, like I told you, even in my research, when I put up that image, I then pulled out quotes saying, participant A stated this, and I quoted. Then you actually code your participants, and then do this especially for the major themes, those which are going to make an impact for your research. Do that for your major themes. Make sure that you have direct quotations from participants. But then again, we don't reveal our participants' names. So now here you see, this is an extract. This is an extract. Let's say that here's a research question. Why do students have a problem with critical reading? And then someone says, when asked what are the challenges students face in developing critical skills, the teachers interviewed felt students had reading challenges. Many students were reading below their grade levels with limited vocabulary. This made it difficult for students to decipher the meaning of written work. Now, here are some of the direct quotations this researcher can pull from his or her transcripts and say, respondent A said this, respondent B talked about reading level, things like that. Maybe from the questionnaire, one respondent stated that their reading talked about the reading level. Yeah. So all of these statements help to support the researcher's narrative here, as the researcher presents his or her findings. So far, are we together?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, so we come basically to the final example, which I presented and I've explained. So I think this one concludes it nicely. So that is the end of data analysis. I've tried to keep it short and sweet so I don't confuse you. Sometimes research can be very, very confusing, but that's one of the points when it becomes a challenge. Yeah. So Francis, I think hard to classify themes should be discarded. I think if there's anything that you can't explain, it's better you leave it out. Better you leave it out. And then said, what are the implications? Just like we also discard certain data in quantitative research, it's also allowed to discard some data. And remember, when you're reporting your research, you don't state that, this is the absolute truth. You say, probably this means this. Then another researcher can come in and build on your research and see if they find the same variables as you found elsewhere. Francis, I hope I've answered your question. What if the hard to classify themes take a huge percentage of responses? Now, Francis, remember, in qualitative research, we do not quantify our research. It's not quantifiable. Then Roger is saying, can you please upload the recordings as soon as possible to classify? Okay, as soon as I end this lecture, I'm going to try and upload it to the drive, then share it with Emma. So do we have any questions?
Doctor, I can continue for now.
We are basically done with the data analysis. What I wanted to suggest to you is it okay if we meet tomorrow? Because you had asked me if I could provide you with a sample concept paper, and I sincerely failed to get one. So what I thought is maybe we could have a discussion tomorrow. The format, yes, the format I can give you. I was hoping maybe we can have a discussion, just a general discussion on concept papers, on anything that was not clear. And also, if maybe you could take time, go through the videos that I've uploaded on data research design. If you have any question, we use
Manuela,
that.
close the door.
We use that tomorrow's lecture for that. Is that okay?
It's fine, doctor.
Yes, that's okay.
That's all right. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, so we can use tomorrow's lecture for that. And then you can use the rest of the time to do your second assignment. I'll put up the quiz in the middle of the week, just so that you don't feel panicked. But don't worry, it will be available for some time. Eh?
Doctor, is the quiz to be answered in the groups or whatever?
No, it's individual. It's individual.
Okay.
Is the quiz, doctor?
Get it on Moodle, doctor.
Sorry? The quiz
So
will be,
get the
it's
quiz
not
on
yet
Moodle.
up, I've not yet put it up, but it will be on Moodle.
Okay.
Alice, you had a question?
No, I think I got an answer. The quiz is not the concept paper we'll do at the end.
No, yeah, no, it's not that. The concept paper assignment, I'll put it up next week on Friday. But it's basically the concept paper, but at individual level now. Any other question? There's a question. What are the terms or instructions of this quiz? Sorry, Eddie, I'm not getting your question. But essentially, it's objective style, and it is 30 questions. All are to be done.
And it's timed, or is it open to?
No, it's timed. It's timed. But I give you, I give you 2 attempts.
Doctor, do we get instant results
Yes.
for the quiz? What to say?
You get instant results.
Is it okay to express our alarmed state?
It's okay, but it's I've never had people fail the quiz. Really, I've never experienced that. It's nothing complicated, nothing complicated at all. Don't worry about it at all. Don't worry, it's nothing complicated, and you have, sometimes I put 2 or 3 attempts. So it's nothing complicated.
Doctor, if they can be 3, really, it will be the best.
2 attempts.
3.
3, doctor. 3.
Okay, but it's very simple, nothing complicated. Someone is asking duration. What do you mean by pardon?
If it's 3 attempts, do you consider the highest mark?
Yes, I consider the highest mark. The highest mark is what I consider. How long will it take? It usually takes about 15 minutes. Yes, for 30 questions. They are quite short. You're really scared. Guys, don't be scared. Don't be scared. It's very easy. It's nothing complicated at all.
Doctor, this is adult learning, so that guys are scared.
Wednesday, I'll put it up on Wednesday, and it will be active for a week. Okay. Francis, have you gotten my answer? I'll put it up on Wednesday, and it will be active for a week. If anyone misses, they can ask me to extend, and I will extend. I can extend for just that person. It's possible for me to do that. Someone is saying adults fear to fail. Don't worry, you're not going to fail.
Yes, adult learning, that's why they fear.
Yeah, don't worry, no one is going to fail. You will fail only if you don't do. I remember when I was going to defend my thesis, and my supervisor and the chair of the panel, the thing they told me is that the only way you will fail is if you fail to open your mouth to talk. That's what they told me. So if you fail, that's basically you haven't made any attempt.
So my question is, I actually appreciated why we're doing research first, and I think it's to our advantage. So my question, just to help me prep myself. So the concept paper, there was a time you gave us a chronology of what feeds into what. It's a concept paper first, and then what, and then like what exactly do we present at the end? Is it the research proposal?
It's the final thing that you have is your thesis or dissertation. So you start with the concept paper, which concept paper develops into a proposal. So the concept paper is about 5, 6 pages, sometimes 8 pages. about maybe maximum 6 pages, 6, 7 pages. Then a proposal is 3 chapters. So the concept paper develops into 3 chapters. So the 3 chapters are basically your chapter 1, which is the concept paper explained in detail. Your chapter 2 is what sometimes someone may refer to as your literature review. Literature review, depending on if your research is quantitative or qualitative. If it's qualitative, that would be a description of your domain. If it's quantitative, it would be literature on your objectives. Then you have your chapter 3. Your chapter 3 is basically your research method or research design in detail. That is the proposal. Then finally, if the proposal is approved, you then go to the field, collect data, and the proposal now, the language changes from the research will, but the research did. And then you add on your chapter 4, which is presentation of your results. Then chapter 5, which is giving recommendations, limitations, recommendations, and conclusion.
All right, that's nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In the research proposal, the quantitative or qualitative chapter, what exactly are you detailing if you have not carried out the research, or if you've not gone to the field, or have you carried out the research but simply haven't gone to the field yet?
For proposal, you've not yet gone to the field. You've not yet gone to the field.
Thank you, Doctor.
Hello, yes. Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Eddie.
There is something I don't understand. Are we talking about the proposal or the concept paper?
No, Alice was asking about the chronological order of what comes first, the concept paper, the proposal, then eventually the thesis or dissertation. She was just asking for the chronological order.
Okay.
Yeah. Milton, you had a question?
Doctor, we can call it a day.
Okay, so then let me wish you all a good night, and I hope you have a good